Ledge fishing is one of the most popular summer techniques for bass. However, most anglers don't know how to set up on ledges properly, where to cast on these ledges, and how to identify key sweet spots on these large offshore structures that hold the biggest bass. In this video, I'm going to explain how you can find these key sweet spots and hit the timing right to put a bunch of big fish in the boat this summer. Let's get into it. Earlier this week, I live streamed the first 2 hours of my fishing trip on Grand Lake. I showed my side imaging, down imaging, 2D sonar, and live scope views as I fished some offshore ledges. I didn't catch any fish during this live stream, but I did identify one really interesting ledge that looked like it had some better quality fish on it. When I first graphed this ledge on the live stream, you could see several fish suspended over the creek channel on side imaging. This is the top of the ledge on side imaging. This is the creek channel, and then this is where the ledge actually drops off and has a drastic change from shallower to deeper water. This black space is the shadow of the ledge, and you can see some individual dots in that shadow, which are bass that are suspended over the creek channel parallel to that ledge. You could also see some better quality fish on 2D sonar that were setting up in 10 to 15 feet of water right on the lip of the ledge, where it dropped from shallower to deeper water. Now, if you watch my live stream, you'll have noticed that there was a lot going on my fish finder screens, and I was having trouble identifying the bass mixed in with all of the other stuff that was happening on these ledges, including schools of baitfish, gar, carp, catfish, all kinds of other things that were kind of muddying up the image. However, based on my 2D sonar settings I've been dialing in with this new Garmin unit, I was able to identify a few bass based on how the shape of the arches were on the 2D sonar, and also the length of the arches. I've made a video explaining how I set up my 2D sonar settings to identify bass, and also how to filter out a lot of the excess noise that shows up on your down imaging view. Definitely check out that video if you want to find better quality bass this summer with your 2D sonar. After identifying some better quality bass on this ledge, I tried to make a few casts. However, after dropping the live scope, I noticed that the fish I was seeing on 2D sonar were not locked in one position. Instead, they were roaming around the ledge, chasing baitfish either over the channel or right on the lip of the ledge. These fish are catchable at times, especially if you have clearer water. In clear water, bass are able to track a swim bait or a flutter spoon or a hair jig from a greater distance, and when they're roaming like this, they will move 20 to 50 feet to come eat your bait. However, in the section of Grand Lake I was fishing during this live stream, the water visibility was between 1 and 2 feet. This makes it a little bit more difficult for the bass to track your bait. Therefore, I picked up a deep diving crankbait and started throwing it down this ledge because I could cover a lot of water, try to intercept those bass as they were swimming around, and also that deep diving crankbait has some vibration to it which will draw those fish in. But because these bass were roaming around so much, it really was down to luck whether I could intercept them with my crankbait. I may have been able to stay there for 30 minutes to an hour and caught a fish or two, but I really like to fish for schools of bass that are set up in one specific spot where I can catch multiple fish on the exact same cast. The reason these bass were roaming so much is because I was fishing, 1, during a full moon, and 2, because I was fishing in the morning. Whenever you have a full moon and it's the morning time, bass are going to be extremely active and they're going to be chasing shad and a lot less likely to set up on one specific spot like a rock pile, a shell bed, or a brush pile. However, as the day progresses and the sun gets higher, these bass will tend to roam less and they'll set up tighter to the bottom and tighter to cover like a brush pile, rock pile, or shell bed. Therefore, after the live stream ended, I graphed around for about 2 more hours and then returned to this ledge where I saw these better quality fish in the hopes that these bass would settle down and actually set up on a key sweet spot. Before I fished the ledge, I regraphed it to see if the fish had changed position. If we compare the side imaging image from the morning to the afternoon, you'll notice something interesting. Well, the first thing you'll notice actually is these images don't look perfectly the same. I graphed them from a slightly different angle, but this log is actually positioned almost in the same spot, though it's a little bit further under the boat in the morning image. But if we look around this log, you'll see that there are a lot more small dots around it in the afternoon image. These are actually fish, and when you're identifying bass on side imaging, what you're looking for are these small grains of rice that are scattered across the bottom. These grains of rice are actually the shadows of fish, and you can see that there are several of them set up around this log in the afternoon when there were very few, if any, in the morning. This let me know that as the sun was getting higher, these bass were positioning further up on the ledge around cover, just like I had predicted. I continued graphing the ledge, and I noticed something even more interesting. If you take a look at the right side of the screen, you'll see that there is a nice rocky patch that's about 20 to 30 feet up on top of the ledge. The actual break of the ledge, or the drop-off, is on the left side of the screen, but this rocky spot over here is actually covered up with fish. It's very hard to differentiate rocks from fish on side imaging, and it takes a trained eye to really understand what you're looking at. But based on how the dots are positioned on the screen and how rock normally looks on your side imaging, I can tell that there are probably 10 to 15 fish that are set up on this rocky spot, and they're actually not set up anywhere near the drop-off. Instead, they've pushed up off of the ledge, or the actual break, up onto the flat, and are now using this rocky spot as a place where they can set up to ambush bait fish in the afternoon. Again, as the sun gets up, these bass are going to position tighter to cover and makes the bass a lot more catchable. After marking the rocky spot in the log, I positioned my boat so that I was in the channel, casting up on top of the flat. I tried to keep the rocky spot in the log at least 75 to 80 feet away from the boat, and I would spot lock and make repeated casts to those fish I was seeing on side imaging. I actually caught a fish on my second or third cast dragging a worm, and then I made another cast and caught this one. Here's one. Got him. Good one. Oh my gosh. Freaking tank, guys. Oh my goodness. Nice one, dude. Pause that thing. Spot lock us. Get it up here, fish. Oh, that's what I'm talking about, guys. Freaking tank on the big worm. The exact same freaking spot we fished this morning on the live stream. I cranked this, fish just did not seem like they were set up right. Now they're set up on the bottom, came back. Timing is everything when you're fishing offshore, guys. The number one factor in offshore bass fishing in the summer is getting the right timing. That is just a tank right there. Oh, there we go, guys. 4 pounds, 10 ounces, absolute tanker. Awesome, guys. Let's get that beautiful bass down back to a ledge, and let's get back out there and try to get another one. Oh man, I'm still shaking from that fish, guys. That is awesome. Got that fish on one of the most classic offshore techniques I can think of, the 10-inch worm. This is the Big Bite Baits 10-inch B2 worm in the plum apple color. Throwing that on 20-pound Sunline FC Sniper fluorocarbon with a 3/8 ounce Denali tungsten slip sinker. I'm pegging that. And I'm also throwing that with a 5/0 offset worm hook from Gamakatsu. Just Texas rigging that deal, throwing it on these ledges. And I mean, you can't get any better than that. Just slow dragging a big worm, it catches big ones, catches numbers. Just throwing that with a 7'6" heavy power worm and jig rod from Denali in the Covert Light series and a Black Max reel, and just bombing that thing over these ledges, guys. And these fish are setting up here finally with the sun, with the conditions. It's all a timing deal out here offshore. I was out here earlier in the morning because I have to get out early with my camera set up for the live stream and everything, but honestly I prefer in the summertime to get out during the hottest part of the day, around noon, 1 o'clock. That's usually the best offshore bite. And if I was fishing tournaments and stuff this time of year, I might spend the first hour going up shallow, chasing some fish up shallow, but then after that I would graph a lot of times for 2 to 3 hours, finding spots where I felt like bigger fish were setting up, but not really doing much fishing. Then I would return to those spots and try to put those better quality fish in the boat when the conditions are perfect like they are now, and you saw it work right now. Got him, big one, another big one. Stay on there, fish. Swimming right at me. Feels good though when that's at the hook. I can't tell how big it is. Oh, nice one. Solid fish. I mean, dude, they're schooled up here now. That is crazy. Beautiful post spawner right there. Whew, let's get a weight on that guy. Here we go, 2 pounds, 9 ounces. He's shaking all over the place. 2.5 pounder to go with that 4.5 pounder, 4 3/4 pounder. Not a bad way to do it, guys. Let's get this guy back down in the lake. Beautiful fish. Oh, there we go, guys. This is when it gets fun, catching them fast and furious on this ledge. And Drops off really sharp right here into the channel, but they're way up on top of the drop. You can actually see them pushing shad when I had the live scope over there. I'm not recording the live scope right now, I'm just kind of staying far away from these fish, bombing a cast. That fish bit it way up there though. A lot of times these fish will set up further on top of these drops than people think, especially when they're feeding like this. They don't like to set up always right on the actual break itself. They like to set up further up on top of the drop, like maybe 20 to 30 yards even at times, way up on top of that thing. So don't just get caught up in fishing the actual ledge itself, where it drops off. A lot of times the feeding area for these fish is actually further up on top of the ledge. These two fish catches show the importance of timing when it comes to offshore fishing, especially in the summertime. I actually graphed and fished this exact spot earlier in the morning during my live stream and didn't get a single bite. Now, I wasn't using the worm, and I wasn't casting on the exact spot I was during the afternoon, but that's because the fish hadn't positioned there yet. They were all setting up near the edge of the drop. However, as the sun came up, they repositioned and moved into a more active feeding position. This is extremely common in the summertime when you're fishing offshore, and usually when I get on a good flurry of 5 to 6 fish catches in a row, it happens between noon and 3 o'clock in the summer, during the hottest part of the day. Now again, if you watch my live stream and saw me not catch any fish on these spots, you would assume there were no fish there and they just weren't good. But in reality, these spots did have quality fish on them, and I identified them with my fish finder in the morning. They just weren't set up properly and they weren't ready to fire. This is one of the most challenging aspects of offshore fishing because you can graph a spot that is absolutely loaded and has maybe the best school of bass on the lake, but if you're not there at the right time of day, the right conditions, you can completely miss that school and not get a single bite. And that's one of the challenges of live streaming for you guys offshore. I can only live stream for about 2 to 3 hours at a time, but a lot of times it takes me 5 to 7 hours to actually find a group of fish and hit them at the right time of day during one of those feeding windows. If you watch the Bassmaster Elite Series or any other professional tournaments, they fish for 8 to 9 hours in a day, and the majority of the anglers catch their fish in, let's say, a 1 hour window out of that 8 or 9 hours. However, when you watch the replay, you just see that 1 hour window and they cut out the other 7 or 8 hours where they weren't getting any bites. It becomes even more challenging when you don't have fish found initially, like these Elite Series guys who spend 3 or 4 days practicing. If you're going out to the lake day of and need to find the fish and hit the proper timing, you have to walk a fine line between locating fish and graphing for them, but also fishing to make sure that you're not missing that key feeding window. This is not something that you can learn to do overnight, and it's going to take many, many hours in the water and many fishing days to start dialing in when those proper feeding windows are on your lake, which spots have fish, and also identifying spots that have fish that maybe aren't firing in that moment that you can return to later and catch fish on like I did in this video. And that's it for this video, guys. Be sure to check out my live stream where I actually graph these spots in real time live. And again, I didn't catch any fish during the live stream, but I found these areas and was able to come back and capitalize them using the correct timing, put some quality fish in the boat. It's a pretty cool lesson, and it should be something that should help you put more fish in the boat this summer. Just don't get discouraged. Hit these spots multiple times a day and you will put quality fish in the boat. You can see patience and perseverance. That's the #1 name of the game with offshore ledge fishing, especially when it's hot out here. But anyways, thanks for checking out this video. We'll see you guys in the next one.